Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin aim to reduce US global dominance hinges on challenging the dollar's status as the world's currency. Other BRICS leaders, like Brazil's Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, Iran's Ali Khamenei, and South Africa's Cyril Ramaphosa, support this anti-US stance. Egypt, despite occasional alignment with the United States, also seeks to preclude the possibility of future sanctions by diversifying away from the dollar. Ethiopia's economic impact is minimal, while Saudi Arabia and the UAE continue to benefit from the dollar's global primacy. Non-mainstream media outlets have extensively covered the purported de-dollarization efforts within BRICS, with headlines proclaiming the BRIC currency swap is a global game changer, and BRICS push currency swap with 29 countries worth $550 billion. However, such reports are mostly speculative, and eye-catching figures like $550 billion tend to be aggregates of current trade volumes, bereft of any tangible backing in the form of official commitments or proposals from member states. The idea of de-dollarization is not new. Russia, China, and other countries have been discussing it for decades. However, there have yet to be any significant movements in this direction. The most concrete steps taken include the establishment of swaps and the use of yuan in trade with heavily sanctioned members Russia and Iran, both of which will be explained later in this video, but this should not be conflated with any global move away from the dollar. Should they wish to change this in the future, BRICS members would have several options for lessening reliance on the dollar, trading in yuan, establishing a BRICS currency, and/or conducting trade using their own national currencies. Each of these alternatives will be examined in detail in the following. The first possible option is that the yuan supplants the greenback. When the yuan was admitted to the International Monetary Fund, IMF Special Drawing Rights (SDR) currencies in 2016, both Xi Jinping and numerous analysts saw it as a significant stride towards globalizing the yuan and reducing reliance on the dollar for trade settlement and foreign reserves. However, almost a decade later, despite China's position as the world's largest trading nation, the yuan hasn't gained significant traction in international trade settlements. The dollar continues to dominate, representing 42% of global trade settlements, while the yuan accounts for only 2.77%. In terms of currency reserves, the dollar holds 59% of the global share, compared to the yuan's 2.6%. Additionally, the dollar comprises 88% of all foreign exchange trading in global FX markets. Part of the buzz surrounding global de-dollarization is due to the yuan overtaking the dollar last year as the primary currency in China's cross-border trade, representing 49% of settlements. This shift is partly driven by China's energy purchases from heavily sanctioned countries like Russia and Iran, where dollar use is restricted. However, it is crucial to highlight that 47% of China's total cross-border trade still occurs in dollars, underscoring the continued significance of the dollar in China's trade. To sidestep the dollar-dominated SWIFT system, China introduced the cross-border interbank payment system (CIPS) for yuan transactions. While it's gained acceptance in countries like Russia and Brazil, it hasn't matched SWIFT's reach. Despite China's successful yuan-based liquid natural gas purchase from France last year, major economies rarely accept yuan for payments. Even among BRICS nations, yuan usage is limited outside of transactions with China, with the dollar remaining the primary medium of exchange. For instance, despite only 15% of India's exports heading to the United States, 86% are dollar-denominated. The adoption of the yuan by BRICS countries raises sovereignty concerns. Despite Russia's reliance on China, Putin is reluctant to abandon the ruble, while India, emerging as a future power, is unwilling to cede economic sovereignty to China. Thus, the proposal for BRICS to universally adopt the yuan for trade appears unfeasible. Another option is for BRICS to create its own currency, an idea hinted at by Xi Jinping and Putin and strongly endorsed by leaders like Lula. However, replacing individual national currencies with a unified BRICS currency could undermine the sovereignty they seek to preserve. Xi Jinping in particular advocates for the internationalization of the yuan rather than its absorption into a bloc currency backed by the South African rand and Ethiopian birr. Creating a BRICS currency would necessitate the establishment of a BRICS central bank. However, the only existing BRICS institution is the China-backed New Development Bank, which is primarily dollar-dominated. Despite intentions to diversify, the dollar still constitutes approximately 75% of lending within the New Development Bank. Establishing a central bank would incur significant costs, and the differing currency values and economic sizes among BRICS members render this option highly problematic. Saudi Arabia and the UAE, both oil-producing nations, primarily trade in dollars and hold dollar reserves. Despite trade tensions, around 17% of China's exports go to the United States and are paid in dollars. Moreover, the Saudi riyal and the UAE dirham are pegged to the dollar. Even the Chinese yuan, with a managed floating peg by Beijing, is closely linked to the dollar. China still holds roughly half of its reserves in US dollars and equivalents. Claims about BRICS using their own currencies in trade are somewhat blurred due to the yuan's status as a BRICS currency. When yuan usage increases, analysts can interpret it as a rise in BRICS currency usage or specifically in yuan usage. However, the use of BRICS currencies other than the yuan remains minimal. For instance, only 4% of China's cross-border trade settlement occurs in currencies other than yuan or dollars, including those of other BRICS nations. Thus, trade in BRICS currencies, excluding the yuan, is minimal. Notably, Russia conducts 75% of its trade with China and 25% with the rest of the world in yuan. As disadvantages outweigh the benefits of creating a BRICS currency, the only viable option is trading in the BRICS countries' own national currencies. This would be the third option going forward. However, the problem here is that the ruble and Iran rial are effectively non-convertible, while the other currencies, apart from the yuan, are not very usable outside of their regions. The currency values also vary dramatically, and most BRICS members would be unwilling to hold large quantities of the currencies of the other members. Additionally, there is no infrastructure in place for BRICS countries to facilitate trade in their own currencies. A payment versus payment, PVP, would have to be established, where the transfer of one currency is contingent upon the simultaneous transfer of another currency, minimizing settlement risk. However, PVP systems do not hedge against exchange rate fluctuation. Given the instability of several of the BRICS currencies, this would not be a viable option. Additionally, PVP systems require simultaneous currency transfers, potentially limiting flexibility and increasing operational complexity. The alternative, a currency swap, hedges against currency fluctuations by fixing the rate at contract initiation, not payment time. China has enacted currency swap deals with Brazil, Russia, and Saudi Arabia, including a recent $7 billion arrangement with Saudi Arabia. While China has set up $117 billion in global currency swaps, these amounts are relatively small compared to total China trade. In 2022, the dollar was involved in over 97%, 95%, 94%, and 88% of foreign exchange transactions for the Indian rupee, Brazilian real, Chinese renminbi, and South African rand, respectively. Another issue with BRICS swaps, rather than using a common currency like the dollar, is the necessity to create a complex network of bilateral agreements tailored to each trading pair. This would entail transferring funds or currency deposits between the central banks of each BRICS member, increasing administrative burdens and tying up hundreds of billions in capital, potentially causing liquidity issues. Thus, in conclusion, transitioning away from the dollar presents challenges for BRICS due to the stability, widespread acceptance, and high liquidity that the greenback currently provides. US government sovereign debt in dollars is considered a risk-free investment, forming the foundation of central banks' foreign currency reserves. Currently, with US interest rates high, central banks are being offered a return exceeding 5%, with zero risk. Another reason countries need to replenish dollar reserves through dollar-denominated trade is to service foreign debt. Nearly half of China's external debts is dollar-denominated, requiring payment of interest and principal in dollars. Similarly, dollars constitute an even larger percentage of the foreign debt of other BRICS members. Therefore, these countries must maintain sufficient dollar reserves earned through trade to service their debt. Looking at the three options for BRICS de-dollarization, China would likely be the only member who would benefit from or likely agree to the bloc switching to yuan. Creating a BRICS currency is an unrealistic pipe dream that fails to address many of the problems facing BRICS members beyond moving away from the dollar. This leaves currency swaps as the only feasible alternative for BRICS to de-dollarize. Yet, this path is also rife with insurmountable obstacles and would predominantly involve China establishing and benefiting from bilateral currency swap arrangements. Consequently, the dollar appears to be the most pragmatic option for the majority of BRICS trade.